The transport shuttle shook as it docked with Kepler Station. Sarah Chun pressed her face against the small window and watched the massive space station grow larger. Her stomach felt tight with nerves. She was about to become the first human to attend the Galactic Military Academy. The shuttle doors opened with a soft hiss. Sarah grabbed her single bag and stepped onto the docking platform. The first thing that hit her was how huge everything was. The ceiling stretched high above her head, designed for beings much taller than humans. The walkways were twice as wide as anything on Earth. Then she saw her new classmates. A group of Carathine cadets stood near the entrance. They looked like giant insects walking on two legs. Their bodies were covered in hard, shiny armor that was actually their skin. Sharp bone blades stuck out from their arms. The smallest one was still twice Sarah's height up behind them. A pack of Vex High moved with smooth, deadly grace. They had 4 arms and long, sharp fingers. Their eyes were completely black and seemed to track every movement around them. Sarah had read that they could see in complete darkness near the far wall. 3 Brontech cadets talked in deep, rumbling voices. They looked like walking boulders with arms and legs. When one of them took a step, the floor vibrated under Sarah's feet. Sarah looked down at her own reflection in the polished floor. Her regulation uniform looked exactly like theirs, but somehow different. Where their uniforms had extra padding and reinforcement for natural weapons and armor, hers looked almost plain. "Look what we have here," a voice said. Behind her, Sarah turned around. One of the Carathians had approached her. His armor was darker than the others, with marks that looked like battle scars. His mandibles clicked as he spoke, which Sarah knew meant he was either amused or annoyed. "The little human has arrived," he said. His voice was deep and harsh, like gravel in a metal pipe. Other cadets began to gather around. Sarah felt very small as dozens of alien eyes focused on her. Some were curious, others looked dismissive. A few seemed almost hungry, like predators sizing up prey. "I am Zector of the House of Sharp Blades," the large Carathine said. "My family has conquered 17 star systems. What has your family conquered, little human?" Sarah kept her voice steady. "We conquered our own fears and reached for the stars." Several aliens made sounds that might have been laughter. Zeker's mandibles clicked faster. "How poetic," he said. "Let us see how well poetry serves you here." An announcement echoed through the station. "All new cadets report to Orientation Hall 7. The crowd began to move. Sarah found herself swept along in a sea of beings that towered over her. She had to dodge elbows, tails, and extra limbs. More than once, someone stepped too close and she had to jump aside to avoid being knocked down. The orientation hall was enormous. Hundreds of seats were arranged in rows that rose up like a mountain. Sarah found an empty seat near the back. The chair was too big for her, designed for larger beings. A tall, thin alien with pale blue skin walked onto the stage. Sarah recognized him as a Threnody from her pre-academy studies. They were known as diplomats and peacekeepers. "Welcome to the Galactic Military Academy," he said. His voice was calm and musical. "I am Commander Veltar. You are here because you represent the finest warriors your species can produce." He gestured to a massive display screen that showed images of space battles and military exercises. "This academy has trained the defenders of our galaxy for over 300 years. Here, you will learn not just to fight, but to think like warriors. You will be tested in ways that will push you to your limits and beyond." The display showed training exercises. Sarah watched as cadets fought in zero gravity, survived on hostile planets, and operated weapons she had only seen in textbooks. "The training is designed for the natural abilities of all member species," Commander Veltar continued. "Your natural weapons, armor, and enhanced senses will be developed to their fullest potential. Sarah noticed that every example on the screen showed beings with claws, natural armor, or obvious physical advantages. She looked down at her own hands. They looked very small and soft compared to the sharp claws and bone blades around her. "Combat trials begin next week," the commander said. "You will be paired randomly with classmates for sparring exercises. Endurance tests will push your bodies to their limits. Survival scenarios will test your ability to function in hostile environments." A Vex-High cadet raised one of her 4 hands. "What accommodations will be made for less physically capable species?" Commander Veltar's expression didn't change. "The galaxy does not make accommodations for weakness. Here, you will either adapt or fail." Sarah felt dozens of eyes turned toward her. She kept her face calm, but inside, her heart was beating fast. She had known this would be difficult, but seeing the size and natural weapons of her classmates made it real. After orientation, cadets were assigned to dormitory blocks. Sarah followed the crowd through corridors that seemed designed for giants. A dormitory room was on the 3rd level of Block 7. Her roommate was already there when she arrived. It was a female Carathian, smaller than the males, but still much larger than Sarah. Her armor was a lighter brown color, and her bone blades were shorter, but looked just as sharp. "I am Cathara," she said. Her voice was higher than the male Carathians, but still much deeper than any human voice. "Sarah-chan," Sarah replied. Cathara looked her up and down. "You are very small, so I've been told. How do humans fight?" "I have read your files, but they contain little information about your natural weapons." Sarah unpacked her few belongings. "We don't have natural weapons. We use tools and our minds. Tools can be taken away. Minds can be clouded by fear or pain." "What then?" "Then we adapt." Cathara made a sound that might have been thoughtful. "Adaptation. Yes, I have heard this about humans. We shall see." That evening, Sarah sat in the Academy's massive library. The ceiling disappeared into shadows far above. Most of the other cadets were in the recreation areas, but Sarah had work to do. She accessed the Academy's biological database and began reading. Carathian anatomy, Vex-High nervous systems, Brontech skeletal structure. She read about natural weapons, armor plating, enhanced reflexes, and sensory advantages. Then she read about weaknesses. Every species had them, though they were often well hidden. Pressure points that could cause temporary paralysis. Nerve clusters that control balance and coordination. Circulation systems that could be disrupted with precise application of force. The library computer recorded that she spent 4 hours reading. When she finally returned to her room, Cathara was already asleep. Sarah lay in her too large bed and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow, real training would begin. She was surrounded by beings who could kill her with their bare hands. But as she closed her eyes, Sarah smiled slightly. They might be stronger, but she was already learning their secrets. The Academy would test everyone's limits. Sarah intended to find out just how far adaptation could take her. 3 weeks passed at the Academy. Sarah had settled into a routine of classes, training, and late-night studying. She quickly learned that being human at the Galactic Military Academy meant being different in ways that mattered. During morning physical training, she watched her classmates perform feats that seemed impossible. Carathians could leap 3 times their height. Vex-High could climb smooth walls using tiny claws in their fingertips. Brontech cadets could lift weights that would crush a human instantly. Sarah ran laps, while others soared through obstacle courses. She lifted light weights while others threw around massive bars of metal like toys. But she also noticed things others didn't see. She watched how they moved, where they put their weight, which muscles they used for different actions. The instructors barely paid attention to her. Commander Veltar often acted like she wasn't there at all. During combat demonstrations, he would say things like, "Of course, some species may need to focus on support roles rather than direct combat. But it was Ziegler who made things truly difficult. It started small." Sarah would return to her locker to find her equipment had been moved. Her training clothes would be soaking wet even though she had left them dry. Her study materials would disappear and turn up in strange places. "Perhaps the human is too forgetful for military service," Ziegler would say loudly when these things happened. Other cadets would click their mandibles or make their species' version of laughter. During sparring practice, Sarah was always paired with the largest, strongest opponents. When she pointed out the size difference to Commander Veltar, he simply said, "The enemy will not consider your size when they attack." One day, Ziegler knocked her down during a grappling exercise. As she tried to get up, he accidentally stepped on her hand with his full weight. Sarah bit back a cry of pain. 3 of her fingers were badly bruised. "Clumsy of me," Ziegler said. But his mandibles were clicking with amusement. Commander Veltar saw what happened but only said, "Cadet Chen, be more aware of your positioning." That night, Sarah sat in the medical bay with ice on her hand. The medical officer, a gentle threnody named Healer Morn, examined her fingers. "They are not broken, but you should rest them for a few days," she said. "I can't miss training," Sarah replied. "Why do you push yourself so hard?" "This academy has support roles for cadets who cannot match the physical requirements." Sarah looked at her bandaged hand. "Because giving up isn't an option." Healer Morum studied her with large, dark eyes. "You are different from what I expected of humans." "What did you expect?" "The report said humans were peaceful, diplomatic, that you preferred to talk rather than fight." Sarah smiled grimly. "We prefer to win rather than lose. How we do it depends on the situation." The harassment got worse after that. Ziegler had gathered a group of followers who called themselves the True Warriors. They made sure Sarah's meals were always cold by the time she got them. They would stand too close in hallways, forcing her to squeeze past their massive bodies. They talked loudly about how some species weren't cut out for real military service. During a zero-gravity training exercise, the harassment became dangerous. The class was learning to maneuver in space using small thruster packs. It required balance, spatial awareness, and precise control. Sarah was doing well, moving smoothly through the 3-dimensional course. She had always been good at math and physics, and the principles of movement and zero gravity made sense to her. That's when Ziegler made his move. He came at her from above, supposedly trying to navigate around an obstacle. But instead of avoiding her, he slammed into Sarah at full speed. His massive armored body hit her like a flying boulder. Sarah spun helplessly through the air. She tried to use her thrusters to stabilize, but she was tumbling too fast. The walls of the training chamber rushed past her in a blur. She couldn't tell which way was up. She hit the far wall hard. The impact knocked the wind out of her lungs and sent lightning bolts of pain through her shoulder. She bounced off the wall and began spinning again, gasping for air. Commander Veltar finally activated his thrusters and caught her. "Accident?" he asked Ziegler. "Of course, Commander. The human moved into my path. Perhaps her reflexes are too slow for zero-gravity work." "Indeed," Veltar said. "Cadet Chan, be more aware of your surroundings. Species differences must be accounted for during training." Sarah said nothing. She couldn't speak yet anyway. But as Veltar helped her to the medical station, she caught Ziegler's eye. He was clicking his mandibles in what she now recognized as Korathian laughter. That night, Sarah didn't go to the library. Instead, she went to Training Room 7, one of the smaller chambers that was usually empty after hours. She put on a training suit and began working out. But this wasn't normal exercise. Sarah moved through combat forms she had learned on Earth, adapting them for the heavier gravity of the station. She practiced strikes against imaginary opponents of different heights and body types. She worked on balance, speed, and precision. She stayed there until late, until sweat soaked her clothes and her muscles ached. When she finally left, she found Cathar waiting outside her room. "You were not in the library tonight," her roommate said. "I was training." "For what?" Sarah looked at her roommate. Cathara was smaller than the males of her species, but still dangerous. Her bone blades gleamed in the corridor lighting. "For whatever comes next," Sarah said. The next few days brought more harassment. The true warriors made sure Sarah was always the target in combat exercises. They accidentally bumped into her in corridors. They talked loudly about how some species should stick to non-combat roles, but Sarah noticed something else. Other cadets were starting to watch what was happening. Not all of them approved of Zector's behavior. A few Vex High cadets had started sitting near her during meals. Some of the smaller species cadets nodded to her respectfully when they passed. The situation reached a breaking point. During a combat tactics class, Commander Veltar was discussing honor duels, an ancient tradition still practiced at the academy. Honor duels settle disputes that cannot be resolved through normal discipline, he explained. They are fought until one cadet yields or becomes unable to continue. Both cadets must agree to the duel for it to be valid. Zector raised one of his bone-bladed arms. "Commander, what if one cadet is obviously weaker than another? Is it still considered honorable?" "Strength is not the only measure of a warrior," Veltar replied. "Honor duels test courage, skill, and determination as much as physical power. But surely there must be some limit? Some recognition that certain species are not suited for real combat?" The classroom grew quiet. Everyone knew who Zector was talking about. Sarah felt dozens of eyes turn toward her. "If you have something to say, Cadet Zector, say it directly," Commander Veltar said. Zector stood up to his full height. His armor gleamed under the classroom lights. "Very well. I formally challenge the human Sarah Chun to an honor duel. Let us settle once and for all whether her species belongs in this academy." The silence in the room was complete. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat. Every alien in the room was staring at her now. Some looked curious, others looked pitying. A few looked excited at the prospect of seeing real combat. Commander Veltar turned to Sarah. "Cadet Chun, you may refuse this challenge. There would be no shame in acknowledging a mismatch." Sarah stood up slowly. She was barely half Zector's height, and probably less than a quarter of his weight. His bone blades were longer than her forearms. His armor could probably stop bullets, but she had spent weeks watching, learning, studying every species in the academy. She had memorized their strengths and, more importantly, their weaknesses. She had trained every night, preparing for something exactly like this. "I accept the challenge," Sarah said clearly. Zector's mandibles clicked with pleasure. "Excellent. Tomorrow evening, in the main gymnasium, the entire academy will see what humans are truly capable of." As the class ended and cadets filed out, Sarah caught fragments of whispered conversations in a dozen different languages. She heard betting odds being discussed. None of them favored her chances, but Sarah wasn't worried about the odds. She was thinking about pressure points, nerve clusters, and the 17 different ways she had learned to take down an opponent 3 times her size. Tomorrow evening, Zector would learn that sometimes the smallest threats are the most dangerous ones. News of the honor duel spread through the academy like fire. By morning, every cadet knew that the small human girl would face Zector in single combat. The betting pools grew larger by the hour. Sarah spent the day in classes as normal, but she could feel eyes following her everywhere. Some cadets whispered when she passed. Others stared openly. A few nodded with what looked like respect, though she wasn't sure why. During lunch, she sat alone at her usual table. The food tasted like dust in her mouth, but she forced herself to eat. Her body would need energy for what was coming. Cathara sat down across from her. "You do not have to do this," her roommate said quietly. "Yes, I do. Instructor is from the warrior caste. He has trained for combat since he could walk. His family is bred for strength and speed for 50 generations." Sarah took another bite of her food. "And what has my family bred for?" Cathara was quiet for a moment. "I do not know. What do humans breed for?" "Survival." That afternoon, Sarah attended her regular classes, but her mind was elsewhere. In xenobiology, she reviewed what she knew about Korathian anatomy. In tactical studies, she thought about leverage and physics. In weapons training, she practiced her balance and timing. Commander Veltar approached her after the weapons class. "Cadet Chun, I must ask one final time. Are you certain about this duel? There's no dishonor in recognizing superior physical capabilities." Sarah cleaned her practice weapon and placed it in its rack. "Commander, respectfully, physical capabilities are not the same as fighting ability. Explain." "On Earth, we have an animal called a mosquito. It weighs almost nothing and has no armor or weapons. But it has killed more humans than any predator in our planet's history." Veltar's expression showed confusion. "I do not understand the comparison." "You will," Sarah said, and walked away. Evening came too quickly and not quickly enough. The main gymnasium had been transformed into a dueling arena. Bleachers surrounded a large circular mat in the center of the room. Every seat was filled with cadets from every species in the academy. Sarah entered through the competitor's tunnel wearing standard academy training gear. The crowd noise was deafening. She could hear dozens of languages being spoken at once, but she didn't need to understand the words to know what they were saying. She could see it in their faces. They expected to watch her get destroyed. Instructor entered from the opposite tunnel, and the crowd's noise doubled. He was magnificent in a terrifying way. His dark armor gleamed under the lights. His bone blades caught the light like polished steel. When he raised his arms, the crowd cheered. He was everything Sarah was not. Tall, powerful, armed, and armored by nature. When he looked at her across the mat, his mandibles clicked with anticipation. Commander Veltar stood in the center of the circle. His voice carried easily over the crowd noise. "This is an honor duel between Cadet Instructor of Korathia Prime and Cadet Sarah Chen of Earth. The rules are simple. Combat continues until one cadet yields or becomes unable to continue. Lethal force is prohibited, but this is real combat. Injuries may occur." He looked at each fighter. "Do you both understand and accept these terms?" "Accepted," Instructor said. His voice rumbled through the gymnasium. "Accepted," Sarah said. Her voice sounded tiny in comparison. "Take your positions." They moved to opposite edges of the circle. The crowd fell silent. Sarah could hear her own breathing, her heartbeat, the hum of the station's air recyclers. Across from her, Instructor shifted his weight and extended his bone blades. "Begin," Veltar called, and stepped back. Instructor roared. It was a sound that could shake windows and stop hearts. The crowd roared with him. He charged across the mat with surprising speed for something so large that Sarah didn't run. She didn't dodge aside. Instead, she took 3 quick steps forward, directly toward him. At the last second, she dropped low and rolled. Instructor's charge carried him over her. As he passed, Sarah struck upward with precision, hitting a nerve cluster just below his left knee. It wasn't a hard blow. To the crowd, it probably looked like she had barely touched him. But Sarah had spent weeks studying Korathian anatomy. She knew exactly where that nerve cluster was and what would happen when it was struck. Instructor stumbled slightly as he turned around. His left leg didn't respond quite as quickly as it should have. He looked down at Sarah with confusion. "Clever," he admitted. "But tricks will not save you." He came at her again, more cautiously this time. His bone blade swept through the air where her head had been a moment before. Sarah ducked and weaved, staying just out of reach. She was faster than he expected. Where he was powerful, she was quick. Where he was armored, she was flexible. When he struck, she wasn't there anymore. But speed alone wouldn't win this fight. Zekir was learning her patterns, adjusting his attacks. Sooner or later, one of those bone blades would connect. When it did, the fight would be over. Sarah needed to change the game. The next time Zekir attacked, Sarah didn't dodge away. Instead, she stepped inside his guard, too close for his long blades to be effective. Her hands moved like lightning, striking pressure points along his ribs. Zekir tried to grab her, but she was already gone, rolling between his legs and striking the back of his other knee as she passed. Now both his legs were compromised. His movement became slightly awkward, his balance not quite perfect. The crowd was starting to notice that something was wrong. "What are you doing to me?" Zekir demanded. Sarah circled him slowly. "Winning." He lunged at her with renewed fury. His bone blades whistled through the air. Sarah bent backward like a dancer, the blades passing inches from her face. As she straightened, she struck 2 more pressure points on his sore arm. Zekir's attacks became less precise. His coordination was failing bit by bit. Sarah's strikes had been carefully chosen, each one targeting a specific nerve or circulation point. She wasn't trying to hurt him badly. She was systematically shutting down his body's ability to function. The crowd was murmuring now. Even the cadets who didn't understand human fighting techniques could see that something unexpected was happening. The giant Carthian was slowing down while the tiny human seemed to be getting faster. Zekir tried a different approach. Instead of precise attacks, he began swinging wildly, hoping to catch Sarah with raw power. It was exactly what she had been waiting for. When someone fights with wild, uncontrolled movements, they create openings. Sarah had spent years learning to exploit those openings. She flowed around his attacks like water around rocks. Each time he overextended, she was there. A strike to the shoulder that made his right arm go numb. A pressure point on his neck that affected his balance. A specific spot on his back that interfered with his breathing. Zekir's roars became gasps. His mighty charges became stumbles. The crowd watched in stunned silence as their champion slowly fell apart. But Zekir was still dangerous. In desperation, he threw himself forward in a tackle that would have crushed Sarah if it connected. She waited until the last possible moment, then stepped aside and struck. Her hand found the exact spot she had been looking for, a nerve cluster at the base of his neck that controlled voluntary muscle movement. She applied pressure with surgical precision. Zekir crashed to the mat and didn't get up. He was conscious, his eyes were open, but his body wouldn't obey his commands. He could speak, but he couldn't move. Sarah stood over him, breathing hard but unmarked. The gymnasium was completely silent. Commander Veltar stepped forward slowly. He knelt beside Zekir and checked his condition. The Carthian could speak and think normally, but his body was temporarily paralyzed. "The duel is over," Veltar announced. Cadet Chun is the victor. The silence stretched on. Hundreds of alien cadets stared at the small human who had just defeated one of the Academy's most feared fighters. No one seemed to know how to react. Sarah offered her hand to Zekir. "The paralysis is temporary. You'll be fine in a few hours." Zekir stared up at her with something that might have been respect. "How?" Sarah smiled. "You spent weeks studying how to hurt me. I spent weeks studying how to stop you." As the medical team arrived to help Zekir, Sarah walked toward the exit. The crowd parted before her like water. She could feel their eyes following her, but the quality of their attention had changed. They were no longer looking at a weak human who didn't belong. They were looking at something much more dangerous. The gymnasium remained silent as the medical team worked on Instructor. Sarah stood at the edge of the mat, sweat cooling on her skin, watching as they checked his vital signs. She knew he would be fine. The nerve paralysis was temporary, designed to disable without permanent harm. But Commander Veltar didn't look like he understood what had just happened. "Cadet Chun," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "Explain your techniques." "Standard pressure point manipulation, sir. Combined with knowledge of Carthian physiology. There is nothing standard about what just occurred," Veltar replied. "You defeated a warrior caste Carthian using methods I have never seen." Around them, the crowd was starting to stir. Conversations broke out in hushed tones. Sarah caught fragments in various languages, but she could tell from body language that opinions were divided. Some cadets looked impressed. Others seemed disturbed. "Where did you learn such fighting methods?" Veltar pressed. Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Earth, sir. We've been preparing for galactic contact longer than most species realize." Before Veltar could respond, footsteps echoed across the gym floor. A group of senior academy instructors approached, led by a figure Sarah had only seen in academy promotional materials. General Corthan of the Vex High, legendary commander of the Titan Nebula campaign. The general moved with the deadly grace typical of his species. His forearms seemed to flow rather than walk. His black eyes took in the scene with predatory intelligence. "Commander Veltar," he said, his voice carrying easily across the space. "I heard there was an interesting demonstration this evening." "General, I'm not sure interesting covers it," Veltar replied. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately." "Nonsense." General Carthan approached the still paralyzed Instructor and knelt beside him. His examination was thorough and professional. 14 separate nerve disruption points struck in sequence, he murmured. "Excellent precision. No permanent damage." He stood and looked at Sarah with new interest. "Remarkable. This wasn't a fight. It was a surgical procedure." Other instructors gathered around them. Sarah recognized Commander Thekmur of the Brontek Heavy Assault Division, Battlemaster Yithara of the Stellar Rangers, and several others whose reputations were legendary. "Cadet," General Corthan said, "demonstrate what you did. Use me as your target." A ripple of shock went through the assembled instructors. Commander Veltar stepped forward. "General, that may not be advisable. We don't fully understand her capabilities." "Precisely why we need to understand them," the general replied. He turned to Sarah. "Show me 3 pressure points. Non-debilitating ones." Sarah hesitated. "Sir, I don't want to hurt you." The general's mandibles clicked in what Sarah was learning to recognize as amusement across species. "Child, I have survived combat with star killers and planet crackers. I think I can handle whatever you might attempt." Sarah approached cautiously. General Corthan stood relaxed but alert. She could see his muscles were ready to react if she tried anything unexpected. "This point controls fine motor function in the primary arms," she said, touching a spot on his shoulder. "This one affects balance integration." Her finger found a precise location near his collarbone. "And this one temporarily disrupts spatial awareness." She barely touched each point, applying no pressure. But General Corthan's expression grew more serious with each demonstration. "You know our anatomy better than some of our own doctors," he said quietly. "Where did you obtain such detailed biological information?" "It's part of standard human education now, sir. We study the physiology of all known galactic species." "Standard education," he repeated. "All humans learn this?" "All humans selected for off-world service. We've been preparing since before first contact was officially established." The implications of this statement settled over the group like a cold wind. Sarah realized she might have said too much, but it was too late to take it back. Battlemaster Yithara, a lean threnody with silver markings, stepped forward. You're saying your species has been systematically studying how to defeat every other species in the galaxy? Not defeat, Sarah corrected. Understand. Knowledge of weaknesses isn't the same as intent to exploit them, but the capability exists, General Corthan observed. Yes, sir. The capability exists. The general exchanged glances with the other instructors. Sarah could sense tension building in the room. Several of the cadets had moved closer, trying to hear the conversation. We need to see the combat recordings, Commander Thikmar rumbled. His voice was so deep it seemed to come from underground. Frame-by-frame analysis of every technique. Already ordered, General Corthan replied. But I suspect we're going to find something that changes how we view humanity's place in the galactic community. On the mat, Jikter was beginning to show signs of recovery. His fingers twitched, and he managed to turn his head slightly. The medical team reported that full function should return within the hour. Cadet Jikter, General Corthan called. Can you speak? Yes, sir. Zekter's voice was weak but clear. What did you learn from this experience? Zekter was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his words were careful and measured. I learned that strength without understanding is not enough. And I learned that I severely underestimated both humans and this human specifically. Wise words. You both fought with honor, though the outcome was unexpected. As the medical team helped Zekter to a sitting position, other cadets began to approach. But their behavior towards Sarah had changed completely. Instead of dismissive stares or curious glances, they looked at her with something approaching wariness. A group of Vex-High cadets were the first to reach her. Their leader, a female named Sithara, spoke in careful, respectful tones. Cadet Chun, we would be honored if you would join our study group. We are analyzing combat techniques from across the galaxy. We are particularly interested in human fighting methods. Added another. Before Sarah could respond, a Brontech cadet approached. Despite his massive size, he moved carefully, as if afraid of startling her. Cadet Chun, I am Gorthel. I wondered if you might be willing to spar with me sometime. Under controlled conditions, of course. Similar requests came from cadets of every species. Sarah realized that in the span of one evening, her status at the academy had completely transformed. She was no longer the weak human who didn't belong. She was now someone to be studied, understood, and perhaps feared. Commander Veltar called for order. All cadets return to your quarters. Normal schedule resumes tomorrow. As the crowd began to disperse, he approached Sarah. Cadet Chun, report to my office at 0800 tomorrow. We have much to discuss. Yes, sir. General Corthan remained behind as the other instructors left. He studied Sarah with those predatory black eyes. Tell me, Cadet, how many humans are currently serving off-world? Sarah thought carefully before answering. I don't have exact numbers, sir. But we're not a large presence yet. Yet, he repeated. That word suggests expected growth. Humans are curious, sir. When we find something interesting, we tend to want to learn more about it. And you find us interesting? Sarah smiled. Sir, we find everything interesting. That's probably our most dangerous trait. General Corthan was quiet for a moment. Then he made a sound that might have been laughter. Indeed. Cadet Chun, I suspect your presence here is going to lead to some very interesting changes in Academy protocols. As he walked away, Sarah heard him speaking into his personal communicator in rapid Vex-High. She caught a few words. Priority report, species reassessment, and immediate attention. Cathara appeared at her side. That was unexpected. Which part? All of it. I have never seen Zekter defeated. I have certainly never seen a human fight like that. Where did you really learn such techniques? Sarah began walking toward the exit. I told you. On Earth, we've been preparing for this for a long time. Preparing for what exactly? Sarah looked at her roommate, wondering how much truth she could safely share.